Next, it's my honor to introduce our next guest, today's keynote speaker, Dr. Richard DiMarchi, whose groundbreaking research has significantly transformed our understanding of an approach to metabolic conditions. His deep history of diabetes and obesity research has been pivotal to these advancements and to potential new treatments that lie ahead. Professor DiMarchi is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and the National Inventors Hall of Fame, and he held influential roles as Group Vice President at Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. And his academic work has advanced understanding of glucagon physiology and diabetes treatment innovations. With over 100 US patents and more than 250 scientific publications, he is a recognized leader in macromolecular medicines and co-founded 6 biotech companies since 2003, including Ambrx and Marcadia, and Indiana's most recent life science IPO, MBX Biosciences, which we'll learn about more later. A decade-long chairman of the Peptide Therapeutics Foundation, he has received top industry awards, including the Merrifield Award, the Erwin Schrödinger Prize, Meinhofer Prize, the Max Bergmann Medal, and the ACS Alfred Berger Award. And just this year, he was honored with the 2024 Mani Balmic Breakthrough of the Year Award. Please help me welcome IU Distinguished Professor of Chemistry and Guild Chair in Molecular Sciences, Dr. Richard DiMarchi.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. 2 days ago, I had no voice. I thought I had picked it up in my international travel, but Dr. Matt Andre tells me it's running around Bloomington, and I probably picked it up closer to home. But I hope my voice holds out as we go through this. I think the first slide is probably here. It is this acknowledgement of the breakthrough recognition for this advance in the treatment of obesity that was bestowed upon myself and Lotte Knudsen in representing Novo Nordisk. It's been a phenomenal year and took just a mere 50 years to get here. Probably more than that, but it's been my 50-year journey. And it's something that is for all of us. It's not just Lotte, it's not just me. It's taken an army of people, some of them no longer with us, that made seminal contributions to allow us to make these discoveries. I characterized it as the end of the beginning, because what's more important is what comes next. But I want to share with you this morning, how did we get to this point so that you have a better comprehension of how we get to the next level. It's been a high-tech, serendipitous journey. This particular textbook that Casey Nicolau, a traditional small molecule organic chemist trained in the Bob Woodward, E.J. Corey method of making small molecules that become drugs, sits in my office as a reflection of what we do and how we can change the world with these molecules. 34 of the 35 chapters are on those small molecules. Only one of them pertains to these large molecules that you would know as peptides, proteins, antibodies, RNA, that are truly changing the world. And these structures that you see around this book are molecules that have characterized my life. When I came to Indiana 50 years ago as a graduate student, 50 years ago last August, it was to be able to make these molecules. The chemistry simply did not exist to make peptides and proteins. These were academic disciplines. The few therapeutics were isolated from blood, extracted from glands such as the pancreas, pigs, cows, to give you insulin. One of the more colorful ones was follicle-stimulating hormone used in fertility treatments that was extracted from the urine of nuns. It became known as holy water. 10 nuns, 10 days, 1 treatment. 10,000 gallons of urine being processed by Serono to make the drug. The world changed by virtue of individuals. Molecules are the software, but the hardware are the individuals who actually changed the world. Bruce Merrifield was someone of profound importance to me. I did my fellowship with him at the Rockefeller, which is an unbelievable place. If you've ever been on the campus, you will know what it is. 120 years existence, small institution, 82 laboratories, and they've had 26 Nobel laureates in that short history. I often jokingly say it's the Yankee Stadium of life sciences. Bruce stepped out of a Steinbeck novel, Grapes of Wrath. His family was moved from Texas into Bakersfield, California, where he went to a junior college, finished his training at UCLA, came to the East, the Rockefeller, to work with a nutritionalist who died at a young age from type 1 diabetes. Bruce was not a synthetic chemist, and yet his work was transformational to synthetic chemistry because he designed, envisioned the ability to do synthesis on a solid support and not have to characterize all of the intermediates. It's the only way you can make something of the complexity of tirzepatide. 30+ synthetic steps, more than 30 asymmetric centers, just couldn't be done in that period of time. It took us 20 years to get to the refinement of this chemistry, and a lot of it was driven by analytical chemistry, the sorts of things that were pioneered at Purdue and IU, chromatography, mass spec. But simultaneous to these advancements in the perfection of this chemistry that I was a part of in the late 70s in New York was this discovery by Graham Bell that appeared in Nature, he leaving Chiron to go to the University of Chicago, becoming an academic, where he has been for the last 40 years, in describing the cloning expression of this pre-protein that included a couple of additional gene products that looked like glucagon. Now, you would know glucagon is the counter-regulatory hormone to insulin, something that raises your glucose where insulin is lowering it. And it became known as glucagon-like peptide 1 and 2 simply because of the chemical sequence, not because of the biology. We had been looking for this substance in the gastrointestinal tract that signals at time of the meal that you're having a meal to prepare the pancreas for this nutrient load, and also to signal to the brain by the gut-brain axis that it's time to stop eating, right? To suppress your appetite. And through the use of these chemistries, a young lady, Svetlana Moishev, who used to work across the bench from me, who developed the chemistry for making glucagon, she was up in Boston and began to make these substances to prove that this was an incretin. It was this gut factor that was having an incretin, an endocrine function to improve metabolism. Interestingly, it was the second incretin that was discovered. The first, a decade earlier, is GIP, the substance that Patrick referred to as the second ingredient in tirzepatide that makes it a special molecule. GIP had totally failed in its ability to function as a drug substance. It was not active in diabetics and had pretty much been discounted, and therefore there was precedent for why GLP-1 would in fact do the same. Now, you have to understand that in this period of time, there was this additional development, the emergence of biotechnology, which I quite frankly think, when historians look back 100 years, 1,000 years from now, will realize that this was one of the seminal events that had allowed us to get control of biology, to make biology a more quantitative science. This publication that appeared in PNAS in January of 1979 heralded the synthesis of human insulin, which was two separate substances that had to be chemically stitched together to make the active substance. Lilly did the heavy lifting. The amount of material that was made to support that publications was micrograms. And within 5 years of the collaboration, Lilly, not far from here, I remember it well because I was part of it in those later years, raised this up to 100 kilograms. Now, if a microgram is just a walk over to McCarty Street, where Lilly's corporate center is, 100 kilograms is a trip to the moon 1,000 times. It doesn't scale linearly, and it really is a heroic achievement by Lilly to have accomplished this. And it was only Lilly that could do it because they had the insulin expertise and the fermentation technology that a company like Novo did not have. I personally think this is as big an contribution that the state of Indiana has made to the global community as there is. Irv Johnson was the champion for this, and he was a cancer pharmacologist that saw the power of molecular biology and what it could mean to the understanding of cancer. He wasn't particularly interested in insulin. He was interested in using the technology and saw this as a way of integrating it into Lilly. And interestingly, in this Science publication back in 1983, heralding the achievement of human insulin, he spoke about the fact, if you can read it, because I can't see it from here, that the global community, the United States population, was growing about 1%, and the population of insulin-using diabetics was growing by 5 to 6%. That was a formula for where we would have to ration insulin, if not for the development of this technology, right? That gave us access to unlimited supply of insulin. But what was missed is what was driving that prevalence was obesity. This was the beginning of the obesity epidemic, and with that increased body weight came the increased diagnosis of diabetes. My part in all of this is I came back to Indiana because I saw the ability to use this commercial tool to make molecules that was superior to what nature provides. Nature selects for physiology. We as medicinal chemists select for pharmacology. Related, but distinctly different. And Humalog, this inversion of 2 amino acids, was the first optimized molecule that was registered and became a very big success for Lilly. Slow to get there, but a very big success. And it set a precedent. I remember those years vividly, and those of you who were with me at Lilly, you remember that these molecules were not popular. Very difficult to make. If you think they're difficult to make in supplying the global community, they were doubly so in that point in time. And I remember one of the more prominent executives at Lilly in the research community said he was so happy that insulin had been completed because now we could get back to discovering molecules the way they were supposed to be discovered. So it wasn't just Lilly. Even at Novo, they failed in their ability to make a Humalog equivalent and decided that they were done with peptides, bought Ferricin, and were going to be a CNS company. The cool kids were in CNS and cancer. Metabolism was viewed as old school, legacy, right? Antibiotics, boring. If you wanted to be at the front end, you had to be doing this other work. Let's advance 10 years, right? Because the molecule was focused on diabetes, but 10 years into it, we had continued to see this ability to lower body weight in rodents. And most believed that it was a toxic effect, of the GI effects that these compounds have, flatulence, nausea, vomiting. So we're just making these animals sick. That's why they were losing weight. And Steve Bloom, a noted physician scientist in Cambridge, did an ICV administration of GLP into the brain of rats that he reported in 1996 in Nature. This is what constituted a Nature publication at that time. And what he saw was it suppressed the appetite. At that same time, at Lilly, I was working with Suat Efendik, who was unbelievably important in convincing me of the importance of these substances, was an advisor to us, and I shared with him, if it's as important as you believe and would be capable of decreasing body weight, prove it in patients. As Gus Watanabe used to like to say, in vitro, in vivo, in veritas, the Latin term for in truth. I'll believe it when I see it in people who are suffering from disease. And he was willing to take GLP-1, clinical grade GLP-1 that I had collaboratively provided to him, and infuse type 2 diabetics that had obesity for 4 weeks with the substance and showed that it decreased their body weight by 3.8 kilograms, where when they were on insulin in the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks, They achieved nothing like that. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, they had the classical increase in body weight on insulin therapy. This led to this patent that Lilly filed at the end of that year in '96 when Steve Bloom was publishing in Nature that eventually yielded a patent to Lilly 7 years later, 2 months after I was out of the company, that covered all GLPs, derivatives, analogs, GLP for the treatment of obesity. It wasn't advanced. In fact, you can jump ahead now 20 years from that point when Novo published their work with Saxenda. Saxenda is a chemically modified form of GLP-1. It has a fatty acid on it to allow it to bind plasma proteins to give it a duration of action that can be given once a day. Victoza is the drug name for treating diabetes. It became Saxenda for treating obesity at an increased dose of 3 milligrams per day. And these results were reported in 2015, again, 20 years from the issuance of that patent. And you can see that the decrease in body weight is about 8-9% in the treated groups relative to the placebo. But importantly, if you look at the magnitude of the improvement, it's about a third of the subjects that lose more than 10% of their body weight, and just 14% that lose more than 15% of their body weight. In truth, this is a diabetes drug that has a weight advantage. It's not an obesity drug. People in Copenhagen hate it when I tell them that. But it was precedent-setting, right? It established that this class of medicines could, in fact, control diabetes. And all of that changed dramatically 3 years later when Novo further optimized the molecule, largely by using a different fatty acid that has been very popular in most of the chemistry community and is a part of tirzepatide and retatrutide. It gave it once-a-week time action. This was to be a me-too to Trulicity, the precedent-setting drug from Lilly, which is an FC fusion that had once-a-week time action for treating diabetes, and it's a spectacular diabetes drug. For reasons that we don't fully understand, it doesn't decrease body weight where Ozempic, and now registered as Wegovy for obesity, had a phenomenal effect in lowering body weight. I've been quoted in the New York Times and elsewhere as saying, this is what broke the sound barrier. This is what proved that we could manage excess weight in the way that we are pharmacologically managing excess blood pressure, excess glucose, excess lipids. And you can see in that little square that 50% of the subjects were losing 15% or more of their body weight, and as many as a third were losing more than 20% of their body weight. This is where we stand today. It's a little chart from Goldman Sachs that demonstrates the number of weeks of treatment relative to the percent body weight lowering. That line that you see that runs through the center is based upon the results with Ozempic or Wegovy. The active ingredient is one and the same, where you can see that decrease in body weight in their step 1 clinical program that was 16% or so, and up above it in the other box is where we were with Saxenda at less than half that result. Everything below that line promises or has proven to be more effective than those drugs, and you will see most notably the most studied or longest studied drug in this setting is tirzepatide, the active ingredient in Mounjaro that recruits in GIP as a second hormone. That hormone that had no activity unto itself. There are 2 other drugs just to the left of that. They're not drugs yet. Survodutide, which is from Boehringer Ingelheim, that recruits a different mechanism, glucagon. And then the integration of all 3 of these together is retatrutide. Again, that is precedent setting. It's not a registered drug yet. This work is work that I did, not the drugs themselves, but the mechanisms. Was the work that I did with Matthias Chupp, who was a postdoc at Lilly when I was an executive there, and we reconnected when I was in Bloomington, and what you see here is in 2009, we published this precedent-setting work that you could integrate these 2 hormones, glucagon, which was counterintuitive, right? It raises blood glucose, with GLP to get a superior weight-lowering agent. In 2013, it was GIP, the active ingredients in tirzepatide. And in 2015, it was the combination of all three of these mechanisms. And so the transition here is, this occurred in the most serendipitous way. I wasn't working on obesity per se. I was aware of what could be done with GLP, but I had gone back to glucagon because there had been little to no interest, including the JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, in supporting the transition of glucagon as we had transitioned insulin to Humalog and making it a better molecule by virtue of chemistry. What this shows you is the little chemistry kit you get if you're an insulin-taking diabetic as a rescue medication should you have an overdose and are in a life-risking situation from that low glucose. It's a lyophilized powder, it's a acidic diluent, you dissolve it up, you put it in the syringe, you give yourself an injection to save your life. And you do that while you're unconscious from the hypoglycemia. Right? Doesn't work. And what we set out to do on our own was, in the upper left, to use synthetic chemistry to optimize this molecule to give us something that was stable, soluble, and could be used as an infusion, could be used as a single injection in physiological saline. And with those chemistries, what we came to realize is that this had an ability to lower body weight. If you're not stable in the diluent, and you're not even soluble at physiological pH, you can't do chronic pharmacology. And so while we had glucagon for 80 years, we really didn't understand its full spectrum of pharmacology. And what we found was it was increasing energy expenditure. It was making you less fuel efficient. Right? You become a gas guzzler. And if you're less fuel efficient, you're losing body weight. Down below, what you see is this integration, the magic of the chemistry, something that also was unprecedented, to be able to make a master key that can signal through all of these receptors. That's rodent data that shows you the superiority of the three. I have to compliment Lilly for their spectacular development, registration of tirzepatide. I'm so pleased with the performance of the molecule and the fact that they took this on and achieved what they did, because there was tremendous skepticism, and small companies just can't do the sort of industrial strength work that's required to register these medications. And I'm really hoping that retatrutide does equally well. So my compliments to the whole company. This is what it looks like. I've been out and about. I gave grand rounds up at Northwestern. Gal comes up to me, hugs me. She says, I'm part of the 100 Club. I don't know what 100 is. She explained to me that's somebody who's lost more than 100 pounds. She was 310 pounds. She was down to 190 pounds, and explained to me that we gave her a get-out-of-jail card, that she thought the rest of her life she would be this way because she hadn't been under 200 pounds since she was an adolescent. And I was just so pleased. This is not that person. This is one that's off of the internet. What does this mean? If you go and look at what about bariatric surgery, where folks have lost as much weight as we are advancing, what does that mean in terms of longevity? And what you see on the left-hand side are patients with type 2 diabetes who have experienced bariatric surgery. On the right are those without diabetes. And in the diagram that has those that have diabetes, what it shows is that over a 10-year period, they reduced their risk of dying by twofold. 20% would have lost their lives to this disease, now down to, I think it's 10 or 11, I can't see the exact number. And for those without diabetes, the improvement is every bit as great, it's just that the consequences are not as large, right? It's extrapolated that this can add as much as 9 years of life, that much weight loss, to type 2 diabetics that lose this much weight. In those without diabetes, a little more than 5 years. What would you do if you were given an additional 5 to 9 years? And what are the public health consequences of that in adding healthy years to people's life, retirement years to people's lives? So let me just spend the last few minutes on what comes next. This is a little cartoon that I took from the New Yorker magazine, and it's built off of something that I heard said about Bruce Merrifield before he won his Nobel Prize in 1984 when I was working with him in the late 70s. I think the quote is, okay, I guess I give him credit for having invented fire, but what has he done lately? And that's exactly the question that was asked of me, of Bruce. He had a great idea, but what's come after it? We are a tough group upon ourselves, incredibly demanding in what we ask of ourselves. And as I think about this integration of hormones, everything that was below that line is multi-mechanism medicines at this point in time. How many substances have we missed that if we had invested in them the way we have invested to optimize insulin, GLP-1, glucagon, now amylin, we would have also found spectacular medicines, and particularly how we test them. This was observational science in mixing these medicines together to see these better outcomes. And I've been challenged with, so what's so great about 1 + 1 + 1 = 3? Well, let's be clear. It was 1 - 1, because glucagon was supposed to be antagonized, plus 0 that equals 3, which shows us that nature works in this concerted way. There's this symphony where it isn't everything pushing in one direction. It's the yin and the yang that gives us what we know as health. And so I've been about these last 20 years, actually starting 8 companies, Vince. We use those to fund the work that we do, and this was the first. That was a chemistry company started with Pete Schultz's technology, Ambrex, in La Jolla, that has taken 20 years before one of the large pharma companies have embraced it, now J&J. It was adding letters to the alphabet, basically putting more amino acids into proteins, and those new amino acids, like wild cards, ketones, aldehydes, give us special function that allow us to introduce drug functions, be it cytotoxics, radioisotopes, to achieve superior outcomes. Medicinal chemistry is a lot like real estate. Location, 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 right? Where you put these functionalities make all the difference in the outcomes. And then 3 other companies, actually 4, right? The Marcadia, which was the first mover in this multi-agonism space that was bought by Roche. They purchased it for $285 million, decided they didn't want to be in diabetes. 10 years later, they come back and buy something for $2.8 billion to follow Lilly, as opposed to when they had the opportunity to lead. MB2 was a follow-up to that. Calibrium was one focused on insulin, bought by Novo, and led to the laboratories that we set out here in the near the airport. And then the last is Adams Lotneck's technology, on antivirals, in the disassembly of viral particles. And all of those have done quite well, and much to the thanks of Fritz French, Kent Harlick, and Derek Small, who's probably here today. More recently, it was mentioned that NBX, a company I started as I was coming out of Novo, was working on precision chemistry, and this is proprietary prodrug chemistry that I had developed in Bloomington with my associates. And what you see there is an IV injection into monkeys and following the blood concentrations of the prodrug in the solid line, decreasing over the course of 10 days after IV, which is accelerated clearance, and monkeys clear much quicker than humans. If anything, this is going to be slower in humans. And what you see is the active entity now, after that single bolus injection, IV, gives you a sustained exposure very tightly of the active substance. Endocrine hormones, insulin, PTH, GLPs, thyroid hormone, have a very narrow therapeutic index. Too much, hypoglycemia, hypercalcemia, right? Gut discomforts. And one of the companies that has competed in this space is Ascendis, that just did a deal with Novo on once monthly incretins, something that we have very much been about as well. This is a different approach. It's more focused on the biology that we started at the beginning of the year. This is the 7th of the companies with Jeff Friedman, Matthias Chupp, focused on what I've called the connectome. That's not the name of the company. But it's basically this question: if you had this valued timepiece and it wasn't working, you'd take it apart to try and figure out which part was defective. When you found that all the parts were not defective, you'd realize that it was the connections that was destroying the function. And that's what we've seen where treatment with things like GLP-1 have restored GIP sensitivity, leptin sensitivity, insulin sensitivity. How does that happen in a biochemical sense? That's the start of this company. This is another one that is a bit more far-reaching, and it is this: the impossible is only impossible until it's made possible. And the gift of diabetes has been obesity. That is, the willingness and the economic incentive to invest in diabetes is what gave us the observations that have given us these anti-obesity drugs. And now what we have is this question of why should we be satisfied with just a 20% reduction in cardiovascular risk? Why can't it be 40? Why can't it be 50? What are those biochemical mechanisms, and can we find ways to medicate to give us this greater performance? I think that's possible. It's just a matter of stretching ourselves. And the investments that are occurring are what I call obesity plus. You know what? Metabolism isn't what we used to think it was. It's far more sexy, right? Now all of a sudden it's sleep apnea, it's osteoarthritis, it's fibrosis, it's kidney disease. It's addictive behaviors: gambling, smoking, drugs. Maybe we really are on a mission from God. It's cognition, right? We're all waiting to see what the SEMA data brings in treating Alzheimer's disease. And what's going to happen is, if those give us a big enough signal, they will constitute registrations for the disease independent of your body weight. Let me close with this slide. It's a very personal thing. This is what appears above my desk at home. I see it virtually every day. It's a collection of those successes: the Breakthrough Award, the integration of these hormones into one, the success recognized in Humalog with Bruce Frank, Ron Chance, Andy Anderson, the lecture at the Karolinska Nobel Forum. I mean, these are all phenomenal accomplishments. I'm really, really appreciative of it. The most important syntheses of my life are those 3 girls that are at the top of that wall. And they came, my wife deserves lion's share of the credit, but they came after the one item I'm going to show you in a minute, which I found in the late 80s in Lilly archives, that convinced me I wanted to be a part of this company. And I think it's appropriate, now 3 weeks removed from Thanksgiving. It's a letter from Elliot Joslin, to Elliot Joslin, from someone at the University of Vermont named Samuel Bassett, in giving his thanks for what Ileton at that point in time has meant to his life. It's too far removed for me to read it to you, and you probably can't read it, but I'd gladly distribute it to you. It's been on my wall ever since to remind me of why we do what we did, and it was sent to Lilly as a Christmas present and to Dr. Banting in November of 1922. And what he indicates in this letter is that we are the imitators of Christ, and Christ came to give us more life and to give it more abundantly. And that's our mission. This is what keeps me going to work 50 years later in my early 70s, to continue to improve these medicines so that we may have more life more abundantly. Keep on rocking, folks.